All right, so Israel is continuing their indiscriminate campaign of violence in Gaza, and it's just getting completely out of hand. The civilian death toll is rising and rising as the days continue, and I call it indiscriminate because they're obliterating civilian infrastructure. They're openly and brazenly committing war crimes. They're even announcing their war crimes on Twitter before doing them, like announcing that they're going to blow up a residential building and then giving people an hour to get the fuck out of the building before it's leveled to the ground. And their justification or explanation for this is often that, well, we have some sort of secret intelligence that we're not going to tell you about, that this building or this location was somehow in connection with Hamas terrorists. And I think this is absolutely ridiculous. I don't think that's anything close to a justification, even if it was true, because if you know anything about Gaza, it's one of the most densely populated places on earth. And so a lot of times there is no difference between civilian infrastructure and things that militants may be taking advantage of, but that is not a green light to kill civilians. That is not a green light to obliterate civilian infrastructure. And so I have multiple examples I want to get into right now of just the most recent egregious versions of this. So they bombed a refugee camp, okay? Israel continued to bombard the Gaza Strip with air raids and artillery shells on Saturday, killing several children and women at a refugee camp. As of early Saturday, at least 137 Palestinians, including 36 children, so we are now at roughly 36 children that have been killed, and 920 have been wounded since hostilities flared up on Monday. That was one that caught my eye, that was especially egregious, bombing a refugee camp. And here's the other one. This just happened. This is pretty much breaking news. Israeli bombs destroy Gaza media center, including the AP, Al Jazeera, and other media outlets completely taken out. So I'll show you the video here of what the bombing actually looks like. This is the collapsing of this building.
God.
That is the Al-Jazeera Tower. That tower is where Al Jazeera's offices were housed. The Associated Press offices were also housed in that building.
God.
Right. So this was live on Al Jazeera. That building was struck by a missile and completely leveled live on Al Jazeera, literally just moments after they were able to get some of their journalists that were on the ground there out of the building. And this also obviously housed other outlets like the AP. And listen, they're bombing civilian infrastructure, okay? This was a place of residence for Palestinian people. It also had offices that included media outlets. And let's not get it confused here, okay? They can say that the target was Hamas. The target was the media outlets, okay? They obliterated this building because they don't want people on the ground being able to report on the atrocities that they are committing. Here was a statement by the AP that they put out in response to this. New York AP says an Israeli airstrike destroyed a high-rise building in Gaza City that housed the offices of the Associated Press and other media outlets on Saturday. All AP employees and freelancers evacuated the building safely. AP President, we are shocked and horrified that the Israeli military would target and destroy the building housing AP's bureau and other news organizations in Gaza. They have long known the location of our bureau and new journalists were there. We received a warning that the building would be hit. We are seeking information from the Israeli government and are engaged with the U.S. State Department to try to learn more. This is incredibly disturbing development. We narrowly avoided a terrible loss of life. A dozen AP journalists and freelancers were inside the building and thankfully were able to evacuate them in time. So these are war crimes, okay? Let's not mince words here. These are war crimes. They're blatant and open and they're in broad daylight, but they're still war crimes. Just because Israel is our ally, that doesn't excuse this behavior. Can you fucking imagine what would happen if the reverse of this had happened? If Palestinians, if Hamas had obliterated U.S. media outlets in Israel? I mean, this is absolutely grotesque behavior, and no matter who it's coming from, this is a war crime. Okay, that's all you can say about it. It's a flat out war crime. Just because they're committing it out in the open and talking about it does not make it not a war crime. Here's what Rashida Tlaib had to say about this. Obviously, one of the only Palestinian Americans that is representing in Congress. She says, Israel targeting media sources so the world can't see Israel's war crimes led by the apartheid-in-chief Netanyahu. It's so the world can't see the killing of babies, children, and their parents. It's so the world can't see Palestinians being massacred. And listen, she's absolutely 100% correct. The reason that Netanyahu, the reason that Israel is doing this is because they know they can get away with it. It's because they know the United States is not going to use the leverage that we have over Israel in order to enact actual change or to put pressure on them in any way, shape, or form. We just had Joe Biden, his administration, his people come out and give statements. I mean, after 9 children were just blown up by Israel, and they couldn't even firmly say that they are against the killing of innocent children. They could not even condemn Israel for killing children. So that's where we're at right now with Joe Biden. That's where we're at with his administration. Just a total unwillingness to accept the actual situation as it is on the ground. Israel is the aggressor. They are the overwhelming military force, okay? Their military equipment and power compared to the power and equipment of Hamas is not even remotely comparable. Okay, it's not even remotely comparable. So as they continue this ongoing assault, they're continuing to commit war crimes. They're continuing to obliterate civilian infrastructure. And so far, there's no consequences. There's no repercussions from the international community stepping in. But I hope that this instance, as tragic as it is, wakes up a lot of these media outlets. I'm not confident that it will. But listen, this is egregious. And I think a lot of media outlets should be using this as a valuable lesson that not even they are safe, and that Israel will continue to indiscriminately bomb civilian centers and make up bullshit excuses to avoid responsibility for it. So this is where we're at right now. The siege continues. You really feel for the Palestinian people, especially in Gaza, but also in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, where the conflict is continuing. They are still being forcibly displaced from their homes by far-right nationalistic settlers that have been continuing a campaign of violence in and of themselves by rampaging through Palestinian stores and destroying them and targeting mosques, etc. So there's a lot of shit happening right now. It's still obviously an ongoing and evolving situation, but this is just the latest, most egregious thing that Israel has done, and there's nothing else you can say about it other than they are committing war crimes out in the open, brazenly, and there seem to be no consequences for it as of yet.